someone call Kuroko because Setting got their asses whooped in this episode. So this week's episode, a couple of things to talk about. First of all, the Setting group, which I feel as though they were built up, and they weren't built up for too long, thankfully, but they were ultimately built up for the past couple episodes, and this episode as well, and ultimately, they never really amounted to much, so I was a little bit disappointed with the Setting group as far as, like, I thought that they were gonna have some sort of relevance at the very least, and, you know, coming into this material, not only in the anime, but also when I read this in the manga, looking at it is just kind of like, well, they were just here, but they didn't do jack shit, and ultimately they got their shit wrecked for trying to be more than they ultimately are. So the Setting group was definitely a disappointing group overall because they didn't do shit, and then they just ultimately get annihilated in the end anyway. Never thought I'd be saying this, but I felt bad for Tsubone, man. How many times is she gonna rip off her fingernails for goddamn Nanika? Which, by the way, the subtitles, I know this is a very weird nitpick, and it's not anything against the episode, but I really wish they would have put Nanika instead of something when you're reading the subtitles, because it is confusing, and Nanika means something. So they ultimately should have just, when they were referring to Nanika, put Nanika and not something, because some of the times I was just getting confused. I was just like, put fucking Nanika in there, god damn it. And this was the episode that we were waiting for as far as it's been building up. Illumi versus Killua. They didn't really get into a fight, and I really wish it would have been some sort of clash or something, because it's been a long time coming, but ultimately I think that that's going to just be something in the distant future if it ever does go down, which I would ultimately like to see, like, Killua just have it finally, you know, he's had it with Illumi and beheads him. Illumi, you know, crosses the line. But this particular encounter, for the most part, was just mainly him threatening him and a lot of back and forth, basically, like, well, if you do this, you do this. I wish we would have gotten the revelation as to what is it that makes him immune to the fifth rule. And it seems as though, mainly from what Killua said and what we could gather, Killua's probably the only one exempt from this rule, because he said if they found out that they would all put needles in his head, which makes me believe that he's the only one that has access to this particular exception, which makes you think, okay, what could that be? I'm thinking one of the biggest things is mainly that he's the only one that actually treated Nanika like a decent person or whatever, and it's already too late at this point because nobody else has done this. It would take time, so ultimately they're like, we're not going to treat this thing, because even to this very point, Illumi's like, that's not our family, I don't give a fuck, and that's even making Killua sad, like, goddamn, you really that fucked up? You really don't see this as our brother, our sister, or anything like that? What's wrong with you? So you could definitely see that he's the only one that actually has a bond with Iruka, and that's probably the exception. That's the only thing I can really think of that makes it so that Killua would be the only person that, you know, Iruka will listen to. Is like, technically, you know, they kind of would still be Oni-chan, you know, Illumi and them, but they never treated Iruka like anything other than a monster, so that might be the reason why he's the exception, unlike them. And maybe it's just me, but I felt like I was about to hear, Lori, Carl, when all those zombies were coming out, or not zombies, but, you know, people with the pins in their face. I was just like, yo, where's Rick? Why isn't Rick screaming, Lori, Carl? Probably trying to get Shane off his woman again. I gotta stop these Walking Dead references. And I ain't gonna lie, I was really hoping that Hisoka would do something fucking crazy, and it was just kind of like, damn, you know, I wanted Hisoka to fucking either kill somebody or attack somebody or do something to make somebody really vengeful against him. And you can see that Hisoka, at the end of the day, he's just a sadistic motherfucker. He is like, well, I can kill him, or I can attack her and kill him, and then it'll make this person mad at me, and then they'll come after me. It's like, he's going to eventually, at some given point, this was showing that it's building up. Some given point, Hisoka is finally not going to hold back, or the circumstances aren't going to fall to the point where he's like, okay, you know what, fuck it, I'll do something else. Eventually, he is going to cross the line, and he is going to be more than just this fucking weird clown that is obsessed with fighting. At some point, he will cross that line, and that's going to be the time where they're going to have to come after him. Either, if that point doesn't come, then something, a catastrophe like no other before, is going to arrive where he's pretty much going to have to be on the good guy's side for the remainder of the story. And for the most part, I felt like it was a good episode. I was a bit disappointed with certain aspects, because the chase with Tsubone to Killua and, you know, kind of him jumping on the blimp and all this other shit that happened kind of was for nothing, because in the end, Illumi was like, all right, you know what? From what you say, it's not over yet, but fuck it, I'm gonna walk away for now. And he kind of just walked away. The thing with Setting being built up, and they were just jack shit. They got their shits kicked in. This wannabe Jotaro buff motherfucker wasn't shit. So it was kind of like a lot of these things that were building up, they kind of just went in a different direction. And it's a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing in a sense of it wasn't cliche bullshit, but then at the same time, it was kind of like building up and then not a big payoff, like a big fight with Killua and Illumi, or somebody, you know, fighting the big one. I mean, I guess the biggest thing that we got out of this little mini arc was Goro's death, so in a sense you can argue that that was the value of everything that happened and kind of this big chase or whatever. But ultimately, as a whole with this episode, it was good, but I was hoping for a little bit more of, like, you know, something grand happening, especially with all the build-up that happened, and it was just kind of like a whimper instead of like a hoorah in the end. So still nonetheless good. I'm gonna give this one 7 out of 10. I was just looking for a little bit more, but ultimately it was still alright. I mean, at the end of the day, seeing Hisoka doing devious things is pretty fucking awesome. And ultimately we progressed on this side of things as far as the Killua and Illumi thing, you know, where they're hunting him down and even fucking going to extent of putting cameras in Tsubone's eye. And now I believe that just leaves us with, for the most part, the election side of things, kind of going through the election to finish this up. And I'm looking forward to next week because seemingly we're only going to have 4 people in the remaining candidates. So we're getting close to wrapping things up, and unfortunately it's sad as far as 148 will be. If you haven't seen the video, 148 is the final episode of Hunter x Hunter, and we're reaching the end. Sad thing, but definitely the manga right now is still ongoing, so if you want to keep going with Hunter x Hunter, I highly recommend, after you watch the anime, go read the manga. You don't have that much to read. There's been like, I believe, what, 10 chapters or so from where the anime will leave off to where the manga is now, so yeah, once you finish the anime, you can go read the manga. Let me know what you thought of this episode, the encounter with Killua and Illumi. Were you excited? Were you disappointed? Again, it was alright, but I was just hoping for a bigger impact because, I mean, this is Killua and Illumi, a huge rivalry, ultimately a huge friction in their relationship as brothers, and then ultimately all the fucked up things that Illumi's done to Killua over the years, and it was just kind of like Killua still having his skepticisms as far as what he should do, trying to protect Luca, having his feelings hurt the way Illumi refers to Luca as she's just some piece of shit on the side that needs to die. And then the Satan group that just got their asses fucking destroyed. It was kind of like, yo, without that Kuroko Kagami, I can't even fucking say the joke, fuck him. And that Tsubone, though, she was going in. And just your overall thoughts of the episode, but that's all I have for this review. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked anything I had to say or enjoyed the video, drop me a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed, if you could do so as well, that'd be awesome. I'm from the world, and as always, people, have an awesome day. Someone call Kuroko because Satan got their asses whooped in this episode. So this week's episode, a couple of things to talk about. First of all, the Satan group, which I feel as though they were built up, and they weren't built up for too long, thankfully, but they were ultimately built up for the past couple episodes, and this episode as well, and ultimately they never really amounted to much, so I was a little bit disappointed with the Satan group as far as, like, I thought that they were gonna have some sort of relevance at the very least, and, you know, coming into this material, not only in the anime, but also when I read this in the manga, looking at it is just kind of like, well, they were just here, but they didn't do jack shit, and ultimately they got their shit wrecked for trying to be more than they ultimately are. So the Setting group was definitely a disappointing group overall because they didn't do shit, and then they just ultimately get annihilated in the end anyway. Never thought I'd be saying this, but I felt bad for Tsubone, man. How many times does she